Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Industry Insights TV. I'm here with Alec Moore from PwC. Alec, how are you?
Doing great. How are you, Matt?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
So, Alec, you're a manager at PwC. Tell us a little bit about your practice and your job.
Okay. So I've been at PwC for about 4.5 years now. I'm situated specifically within the capital markets management consulting practice. And really what that means, as the title describes, is, we work in the capital markets industry. So this is generally financial services institutions, sometimes technology firms, but on projects spanning the front, middle, and back office of their capital markets branches. The management consulting part is, of course, we're consulting to management. So this tends to be levels between vice president and MD.
You mentioned that you've been at PwC for 4.5 years, and you've had different positions within the organization. Can you tell us a little bit about each of the responsibilities at the different levels you've been at?
Sure. So PwC, like most consulting firms, is fairly hierarchical in terms of its organizational structure, and it's meant to be more of a pyramid. So you have 5 or 6 levels. So it goes associate, senior associate, manager, director, and then partner. Again, there are some nuances. For example, recently we instituted a new senior manager role. For later joiners, you can also enter as an MD, or if you're not on the partner track, you can go the MD route at PwC. Now, in terms of the difference in responsibility, really what starts to change over time is more of managing others, more sales and opportunity development. There might be different types of firm reinvestment that you're working on. So, for example, when I first joined the firm, I joined as an experienced associate, which is just, an associate level who joined from industry rather than straight out of college. And my roles and responsibilities were very focused on client delivery. So whatever the project was, I was embedded with the client, generally, taking direction from them or my team to execute on whatever deliverables and project that they had in scope. Now, as you start moving up and now, taking on fully the role of manager, I have senior associates and associates below me who I'm providing direction to and managing day to day. And that's expected to take about 80% of my time. Now, the other 20% is more focused on, again, sales and opportunity development. So this is working on proposals, cultivating new clients. So if I'm working on benchmarking, or something of that nature that might lead to an active pursuit, or account planning for a new client, kind of understanding kind of who the stakeholders are, what are the key projects we could work on. So there's kind of that aspect. But now PwC, also similar to other firms in the market, is pivoting more toward technology. And so with that, there's a very large focus at our firm on digital impact. And so with this, one of the things, again, I'm spending kind of that other 20% of my time doing is helping to develop a number of different internally built technology tools that we can then, pitch to clients in tandem with our consulting services.
You mentioned that PwC is focusing on technology, and that, I imagine, is a response to the changing environment that you're in. What are some things that you personally do to learn, grow, and fine-tune your skills?
Yeah, well, I think before I answer that question, I think kind of setting the context of why that shift is happening is important. And so you'll find if you work in consulting that, the consulting business can be very cyclical. And so, we have to kind of, meet the demands of our clients as they currently stand, and then also look ahead to the future of what they're going to need next. And so when I joined the firm about 4.5 years ago, as I mentioned, this was kind of at the tail end of the financial the Great Recession, the financial services crisis. And so there was a lot of regulatory work kind of coming out of Dodd-Frank and other global regulations. And so we were very focused on that, and to kind of meet compliance with those various regulations. A lot of our clients were kind of throwing bodies at them. So we experienced, or what the clients experienced, was a very bloated middle office, large compliance departments, maybe large risk departments, legal departments, etc. And now what they're trying to do is streamline all of these processes through technology. And so it's very important that you kind of look ahead to what's next when you're working in consulting, or it's easy to be left behind. And so in terms of your specific question of how I keep my skills sharp, again, some of this you learn based on the proposals that are coming in. Others, for example, one of an active way that I'm kind of continually enhancing my skills is through an internal automation working group that we have. There's a number of specific pitches and things that we can work on for that. For example, tomorrow I'm going to a client to present with a couple of directors kind of at their own technology fair. Again, this kind of gives you exposure and confidence in what you're learning, and again, kind of demonstrates to the market that you are kind of staying a step ahead and that you will be able to meet their next need.
In terms of skill sets, to succeed as you have done in your job, you've had to exercise hard and soft skills. Can you talk about some of the hard skills that you need, but then also some of the soft skills that you need to be in your role?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm going to start with the soft skills because I think that they're underestimated in consulting. I think one of the most important skills to have is strong communication skills. And so, for example, alumni from my undergraduate college have reached out to me over the years, and they have stellar resumes, seem to be excellent students, but when you speak to them over the phone or in person, often their communication skills are lacking. The reason why it's so important is because, especially in the advisory practice that I'm in, day to day, you're working with clients either on the phone, or in person, but it's very much communication oriented. And often you're working across cultures. I mean, for example, I've worked with Japanese, French, German, American banks, and technology companies, and all of these different all of these cultures are different, and so the need for strong communication skills is extremely important. And just kind of elaborating on this point a little bit more, another question that I've received in the past is, what kind of courses were most beneficial to me in succeeding. And one of the classes I took in my undergrad was called The Craft of Argument, and I thought that it was extremely helpful. I mean, one of the things that, beyond just kind of communicating day to day with the client, one of the things that is kind of expected as you go up is to start demonstrating expertise in a particular area or multiple areas. And how you do that is writing thought leadership papers. And so again, not only the verbal, but also the written communication is very important. Now, on kind of the hard skills side, it really depends on what practice you're in. So consulting firms tend to have, 4 or 5 major practice areas. So management consulting, where I'm at, technology consulting, those kind of go hand in hand often. Then you have risk consulting, which might be focused more on regulatory issues. And then, of course, strategy, which kind of sits on top of that. And so, again, the type of hard skills vary in each one, but what you're seeing more now is the ability to manage a project, not only just from kind of the project content side, but also from the technology side. And so what we're seeing now is, of course, Excel has always been important, but it's becoming more important now, just given that a lot of the projects deal with a lot of data. And so managing and manipulating that data and presenting it in a clear and concise way is important. But with that, we also see kind of new tools that are coming out that are kind of the next generation of Excel. And so getting familiar with some of those is important as well.
Thank you. What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20 years old?
So I thought I might get this question, and I didn't have an answer, didn't immediately pop into my mind. But what I would say is that don't underestimate perseverance. So if you have kind of a medium-term or long-term goal, even if the route that you appear to be taking initially might seem winding or non-direct, I don't think that that should necessarily be a deterrent from whatever your goal ultimately may be. And I'll use my own background as a little bit of an example. When I graduated, I taught for 2 years on the Navajo reservation. It's a Native American reservation in the U.S. in the Southwest. And again, for my 2 years there, I was still knew I might be interested in consulting long term, and ultimately reached out to and earned an internship at a small consulting firm in Philadelphia that was focused on education issues. Then, after I completed my 2-year commitment, I moved to Washington, D.C., where I worked in Social Security policy, both at a small advisory board and on the Hill at the Senate Finance Committee. And it wasn't until after those 2 roles that I ultimately got accepted a job in consulting and financial services at PwC. And so while there seem to be an apparent disconnect between working on in education reform and then Social Security policy and then finally financial services consulting, the connection really is going from kind of a frontline worker to being kind of in between at a semi-independent agency making recommendations about a very large program and agency, and then now being kind of a full third-party consultant coming in, advising, and leaving. And so what's important, I think, is as you kind of think about what your medium or long-term goal might be career-wise, is, everything initially may not make complete sense, but as long as you can start to kind of weave together the story in a logical way that makes sense to you, that would make sense to others, and that you can show kind of your true passion ultimately lies in being that third-party advisor, working in financial services, I think that's what's, ultimately can lead to success. And again, that's why I would just get back to kind of the word, perseverance, and, where you start out is not necessarily an indication of where you'll end up.
Talk to us a little bit more about the traditional versus non-traditional routes into a company like PwC.
Yeah, well, so the example that I just provided is probably as non-traditional as you can get. But one other point that I would elaborate on what I just said is that again, a lot of the skills that you develop in other places are applicable to consulting. So, for example, when I was teaching, although they might not seem like the most premier stakeholders, like you're not working with the CEO of a financial services institution in New York City, there's the same skills are relevant when you're teaching on the reservation. So for example, every day you're managing a bunch of different types of stakeholders. You have the students, the principal, the other teachers, the parents, the district. If you're going to grad school, in my case, I was working with a nonprofit, so you have those people as well. So that, that's already 6 or 7 different stakeholder groups, and they all need to be managed differently. And so taking those type of experiences and thinking about how they might apply in the future can, again, be very helpful. So that's non-traditional. Now, traditional, what you'll see most often is that to break into consulting, most people, especially in my practice, tend to come out of either law school or MBA programs. Of course, we do accept undergrads straight out of college, but they still tend to come from like a large university's business school. So again, the type of consulting firm that you get into might have its own list of target schools. I mean, I know certainly we do, but again, it tends to be more kind of business school focused. And now increasingly, rather than just being, straight, business school core management skills, how a lot of candidates differentiate themselves is if they have some sort of minor or concentration that's in some way more focused on technology or, digital experience.
Thank you, Alec. Alec, I want to close out our meeting by having you respond to a quote. Okay. Walt Disney said, "I've been up against tough competition all of my life. I wouldn't know how to get along without it."
Well, I think that's certainly true in consulting. I think in certain ways it can be even more competitive than other industries because at the end of the year you are, ranked against your peers who are in your cohort or at your staff class level, and because it is intended to be a pyramid structure, as you go up, certain people should drop off, either going to other firms or other industries or whatever else it might be. So you're constantly competing. Now, of course, PwC, just like all firms, also really tries very hard to foster an attitude of or a culture of collaboration. And so kind of you can't always be throwing elbows, and you need to learn how to work with other people as a team, because ultimately our projects are team-based, right? You're going to have a number of other people you're working with. And so I think, again, just kind of concluding, it can be fierce competition. I think there's kind of three general attitudes that can lead to success at a consulting firm. One is, natural intelligence, but I think almost equally important, if not more so, is teamwork and grit, and kind of really kind of digging in and getting out what you put into the experience.
Alec, thank you for your time.
Thank you.